Okay, we'll continue with our media availabilities. We are now joined by Trevor Bayne, Knoxville, Tennessee native and driver of the number 6 Advocare Ford for Roush Fenway Racing. Trevor currently sits just 8 points below the cutoff to make the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup, and he had a strong finish here in April, finishing 5th. So Trevor, thanks for coming in, and just talk about your outlook for the weekend.
Yeah, thank you. This weekend, obviously, there are a lot of unknowns. We've seen some practices, seen a race, and we're all trying to take it in as drivers. And, a lot of people are texting back and forth about the different things they think are going to happen, but nobody really knows what's going to happen yet. I definitely think in the Cup Series, you have a lot more guys who enjoy running the top and will move up as practice goes on. We kind of saw that even here at the last race. It all started on the bottom in practice, but by practice 2, by practice 3, the groove had moved to the top. With only a couple guys attempting to run that middle to top in the truck race, you didn't really have an opportunity for the track to rubber up. So I look forward to seeing if the race changes, if you have to adapt as a driver as the race goes on, if the bottom goes away with more laps, without going out and scuffing the track or dragging the track or whatever you want to call it, in between. So I do think you're going to have to be versatile. You're going to have to adapt this weekend. But one thing I feel really good about is the car that we had here last time. We came back with a very, very similar package this weekend, and that car was really good on the top, but one of our strengths was actually being able to restart on the bottom and not lose ground. So if the race does come down to where you have to be able to make the bottom work, I think we've got a car potentially that can do that. I'll let you know after practice, but in my head it sounds really good right now. So we're just going to see how practice goes, and we know we've got to be nimble and be ready to react to whatever's going on here with all the unknowns.
Okay, we'll now open it up for questions. We'll take our first question from Woody and then come up to Jeff.
Woody came with MRN. Trevor, just wanted to get you to kind of revisit your Ironman trip to Ireland, some of the things you saw, and what the future holds for you in the Ironman world.
Well, like I told you earlier, I sold it to my wife as a vacation for the off weekend, so I probably didn't do as well in my race as I could have had I just laid around on the couch for like 4 days before. Instead, we were up touring around and driving, and on the wrong side of the road, by the way, which was different for me. That's the first time I've experienced that, so good thing I got the tire and wheel insurance on the rental car. The curbs didn't like me too well there on the wrong side of the car, but we were driving around and really saw all of Ireland and even Northern Ireland, so that was really fun. But the trip really started for me when I got there to Sunday morning, 4 a.m., waking up, getting ready for that race, which, by the way, I think the Xfinity race had just ended here or something. It was like 11 o'clock p.m. here, so that time change was a little different. Got up at 4, started getting my nutrition going with my Advocare products and some breakfast, and got ready to go race my first half Ironman 70.3, and went really well. There are other factors in other forms of racing too. So here we deal with rain. There we dealt with rain. It rained on the bike. You still get to ride during that portion. But something that caught my attention the day before that I never really thought about was when they started talking about canceling the swim for jellyfish. So we're going out into this harbor to swim there in Ireland, and they had this report that the beaches are closed for lion's mane jellyfish, which, by the way, are the largest and 5th most venomous jellyfish in the world. So I was pretty thankful we were going to have wetsuits on, but there are a lot of factors you don't really think about when you're going to do another form of racing. So I didn't get stung by jellyfish. That was good. Got out of the water alive and pretty fast. Made it through the bike decent. The rain slowed us down a little bit, and then got to the run. And mile 7, I started questioning myself. I was like arguing with myself. How is this a good idea for my off weekend? How in the world is this considered fun at all? And 2 days later, I was already thinking about when I'm going to do my next one. So you forget fast how bad things like that hurt when you're pushing yourself. But it was really fun for me. It challenged me. I feel like that morning I woke up and Josh Wise had been training me for a long time, and I was talking to him about it. And that day that's probably the most fit you've ever been in your life when you go to do a race like that, and you've tapered and you've trained with a lot of volume of workouts and riding, swimming, running. A lot of guys are starting to do that around the garage here, so it's fun to see. But that day was probably the most fit I've ever been in my life, so it's pretty cool to do that.
Okay, we'll go next to Jeff and then over to Mark.
Jeff Gluck from USA Today. Trevor, if the bottom is the preferred lane and it turns into one of those old Bristol type races, does the bump and run become more acceptable, and do guys have to change their mentality for that, or if somebody gets bumped, are they going to be mad no matter the circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing. It's a fine line here. I mean, you've kind of seen it on the top with the slide job. People do it, and some people get mad. Somebody cuts them off or slides them up into the fence or whatever. But, I mean, when you're racing, and you got to go for it. And if that's the only way to pass, it's the only way to pass. Obviously, there's a difference in a bump and run and a crash somebody, and that's the line you got to walk. To me, if you've got to be on the bottom, somebody's holding you up, and you run in there and you move them up a lane and you get the position and run by them, that's acceptable. You go in and you knock somebody from the bottom lane to the fourth lane, which doesn't exist, and they're in the fence. That's something you've got issues with, and you can kind of tell the intent when you're racing around somebody, and sometimes you deserve it. You hold somebody up 4 or 5 laps, and they're kind of nudging you, and finally they have enough and they move you. But we'll just have to see how it works out. I'm hopeful that there are going to be a couple lanes and you'll be able to adapt and move around. But if not, I mean, it's going to be the Bristol of old, and drivers are just going to have to check their feelings at the start-finish line when we go by for the first time.
Okay, Mark.
Mark Garrow, PRN. Trevor, how do you view your situation now, where you are in the points, in view of Chris's win, kind of taking potentially one spot out of the mix as far as getting in on points?
Yeah, I mean, with Tony Stewart and Chris Buescher having wins, obviously that changed the landscape a lot for us. And then with Dale Jr. And the issues he's gone through, it's kind of evened out some of that for us in our point standings. Obviously, if he returned, he could still be a factor. But for us right now, we just have to get the most out of every weekend. A lot like what Chris was saying, we're in a very similar situation where we're points racing, but you need a win. For us, I don't know that points racing alone is going to get us in. We've basically got to beat 2 guys if you figure that Chris can get in the top 30, which is still going to be a challenge for him as well. I mean, they've run a full season and they're back 3-4 points from 30th, so there is a potential that doesn't happen, but we race as if he's already in. For myself and my team, we come to Bristol and say, you know what, we need to win this race. We put the effort in and we go at it as if we've got to win, and you've got to do it in a way where you're not making mistakes, though. You don't want to force something that isn't there and cost yourself points. We've still got a long season to go, 14 races, and so these next 4, we race them a certain way, and then we race the next 10 a certain way. But right now for us, Matt will be aggressive in his calls. I'm going to be aggressive in the way that I handle my business, but also cautious if you can at the same time, kind of like Watkins Glen. I worked really hard to be better at road racing. I felt like that was an area where I really struggled at this season at Sonoma, and I put in more time working on that than I've ever put into anything in racing. Basically I committed to 6-7 weeks of my wife and I saying, this is what we have to do. I'm not going to be home except for like 3 days in the next 6 weeks, and I've got to go work at this and get better at it. And the result showed for us. So I was really thankful that the Lord honored that, and that we got a result out of it with a top 10. But we come to Bristol the same way. I put all the effort I can into this, knowing that it's really going to count, and I be aggressive. I don't give up anything, kind of like Watkins Glen. I didn't feel like I let anybody run over me, but I also didn't do dumb things and run off the racetrack and tear up my race car, burn the brakes off. I got to do that here at Bristol this weekend. It's no different than what we did at the Glen.
Okay, we'll take our next question from Pete and then go over to Jeff.
Pete Iacobelli, Associated Press. How do you feel about the progress you've made this year from last year, and what's the attitude around Roush Fenway? Does it feel like the programs are getting back to where you all want them to be?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not where we want to be because we're not winning races yet. But where we are in contention, I mean, the fact that we're contending and we're in the discussion for a chase spot on points says a lot about what my team has done this year. Matt Pusha has been a great fit for me. He's a guy that has helped me keep my head and worked really hard together. He's a guy that will put in the hours, and I'm in that same boat. So I feel like we really mesh well together at the race shop. We discuss things. We have a lot of conversation leading into the race weekend, how we expect it to go, and typically it goes that way. And then down the line, I mean, Matt's a little superstitious, so he didn't like that I said it at the meeting on Tuesday at the race shop, but we haven't had anything fall off our race cars. Our guys have done a great job of making sure the details are done, and that's why we're in this situation. We probably aren't as fast as some of the guys we're racing around for this spot in the chase, but we've been consistent. We've made progress in that area. Myself, other than Indy, I don't feel like I've made too many mistakes on the racetrack that have cost me points. Maybe there have been days where if I was really just nailed everything, I could have gained 2 spots or 3 spots early in the season when we first started working together. So I feel like we've maximized every race, and that's why we're here. So I'm really excited about that. I'd love to see more raw speed in our race cars and in myself when I unload for practice, and get back to how we were early in the season when we were qualifying really well. We were making the final round almost every week, and the last few weeks, we've kind of fallen into that second round area, and it makes racing a lot harder. So I want to get back to that raw speed of early in the season and continue to execute like we've been doing. But I'm really impressed by what Roush Fenway's done. It's very tough in this sport to turn things around when you're chasing a moving target. So they've done a great job. All the gains we've made are showing results, and that's what we want to see.
Okay, we'll go to Jeff, come over to Chris, and then finish up with Dustin.
Hey, Trevor, how important in this sport is momentum? And looking back at this race, Food City 500 back in April, that 5th place finish, how important was that for your team as far as gaining momentum?
Well, I mean, it definitely gives us something to build on. And, when we came here the last time, we left being in the chase, I believe. And so to be this much further into the season and still be in that same situation, we've done a good job building off of that finish. For me, I'm not a guy who would tell you that, a driver gets confidence all of a sudden and he goes out and he starts winning races because his confidence is up. Your confidence is up because your team is doing something that you can be confident in. And that's what we have going on this year. I can be confident in my guys because they're doing their jobs well. My guys can have confidence in what I'm trying to do on the racetrack because they know I'm putting the effort in. And so that momentum and that confidence comes from something that's real. It's not like you just say to yourself, I'm going to show up and be confident today, and you go faster. It's just building and trusting and working together as a team. And like I said, I think that's something we're doing really well together, and that's what we can hope to continue to do these next 4 weeks, and then see where we're at and reevaluate after that and see how we race the last 10.
Okay, Chris?
ChrisMankitchens.com. Trevor, what's your outlook going to Michigan next week, and can you talk about being a dad, for the first full season of your Cup season?
Yeah, Michigan was tough last time. Jimmy Johnson and I are good friends, and we go ride our road bikes together, and I think we did that weekend, and wiped them out there at one point. So the cars were just tough to handle around other people. You could drive in a foot too deep, and next thing you know, you're sliding around, and that's why you saw a lot of attrition there. And being in the situation we're in, obviously Bristol will change the situation we're in for good or for bad. We'll know how we have to race Michigan, but it is a tough race where a lot of things can happen, and it's one of those places, again, where I bring up qualifying. We've got to qualify well there to run well there. It's so tough to pass, so tough to get track position, but it does lend itself to being aggressive on strategy. So I feel like I've got one of the best guys on the box with Matt making those calls and getting me some track position, kind of like he did last weekend. So that's kind of how you have to race Michigan, and with that rules package, it becomes even more of an issue and even tougher to race around other people. Yep.
Okay, last question with Dustin.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. I've got a couple questions for you. The talk about the bump and run, if that does come back, then what's it like on Monday then? I mean, is it going to be texting back and forth, or is it and what are those conversations like, or are those even necessary, and too much is made of those things?
Well, to go back to his question, I have a daughter that I've got to answer to. So for me, the way I handle my business, there are a lot of people looking at that, and as I'm a dad now, I kind of have to think about that. So getting out of the car and throwing your stuff and going up to somebody wanting to fight is probably not a good example for her as she gets older. But for me, I think I like to talk through things. Even when my wife and I have a little argument or something, I'm one of the guys that wants to talk it out and get it all out there, not have anything left inside that you're thinking or feeling about this other guy and carrying it week to week. I hate that mentality of, I've got a checklist and I'm coming for you, and I'm going to check you off next week, because most of the time that doesn't happen anyways. People just like to talk about it. So for me, I'd rather air it out. You have an issue, you talk about it, you get it behind you, and you go on to the next race. We're all here trying to do the same thing, but that doesn't mean it's no holds bar and just go out there and wreck everybody or get wrecked by everybody. There's also a respect that you have to have for each other and what we're trying to do here. I think everybody knows each other's situation for the chase, and we know the guys that are in, the guys that are out, the guys that don't have a shot, and you kind of pay attention to the way they race you and the way you race them.
And also wanted to ask you, in the last few weeks, the sport has seen Chris Buescher scores first series win, Justin Marks scores first series win, Ben Kennedy do that.
Yep.
What is that experience like as you see other guys go through it? What does that bring back for you? And two, what is the weight on one shoulder in trying to get that second win? Because a lot of times you hear drivers about, for lack of a better term, being a one-hit wonder in one sense in that way.
Yeah, for every single one of those instances, I couldn't be more excited for those guys. Justin Marcus is a friend of mine, Chris Busher the same, and I haven't spent much time with Ben Kennedy, but just listening to his interviews and, the humility he has and the way he's going about it, I can really appreciate that. And so I was really excited for him to get his win here. Same for Justin and same for Chris. But you're right. This sport is what have you done for me today? Not even lately, it's today. And so those guys know that win was great, and they'll celebrate it this week. But when they go to the racetrack next weekend, you got to go do it again, and that's a lot of pressure. But it's what we're here for. We want to win. We aren't here to drive around in circles and collect a paycheck. We're here to win races, and that's what those guys are doing. That's what I'm here to do. And it's not about satisfying everybody else's expectations. It's about satisfying your own, and that's why we do it. Yes, sir.
Trevor, thank you so much for coming in. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you, guys.